So once I'm ready to FT enable this VM and I've got its disk ready and I've got my networking ready, I can choose turn on fault tolerance. When I turn this on, there are a couple of things that are going to happen. The DRS automation level for this VM is going to change to disable. Right? DRS is no longer going to actually move this thing around from a load balance perspective. I told you you're going to lose some things whenever you turn on FT. Also, the memory reservation of this VM is going to be changed to the memory size of the VM and maintain equal until fault tolerance is turned off. So essentially, you are now reserving the full quantity of the VM, the assigned memory to the VM, as a reservation. That pulls that. You're no longer able to overcommit your memory because the reservation is going to be set for this VM to as much as it needs. You're losing on the DRS side now, and you're also paying memory. The available memory you have is going to be reduced by whatever this amount is to support that because of this memory reservation. So this dialog box appears, are you sure you want to turn on FT? Once I do that, okay, once I turn on fault tolerance, you see how the second VM is being created. So in the background, it's actually turning on fault tolerance and creating and ultimately registering this secondary VM. Two VMs, two VMDK files, right? Two disk files, two instances running on two different servers, both of which have this reservation. So you can see that, well, doing this is going to involve there's some thinking you're going to have to do before you decide whether or not this is important for your needs. So after a minute or so, fault tolerance is turned on for this VM. You will notice that at this point it's very difficult to understand if fault tolerance is turned on, at least via this view. I can then go ahead and power on the VM and watch it begin operating. There we go. It's starting the fault-tolerant VM. It's migrating the active state. And here in just a minute or so, I'll actually have a protected virtual machine that's up and running. And we can actually, there we go, I do have HA protection on it. And now I do have a virtual machine that's operating inside of my cluster. If I click over here under our cluster and I look at virtual machines, I see VM1 here, and then VM1 secondary here as the secondary to this VM. VM1 is operating on ESX2, whereas VM1 secondary is operating on ESX1. So I now have these two VMs that are operating in lockstep, more or less. Now I say lockstep because they are not completely 100% in real time operating in lockstep. I mean, they may be a number of hundreds of milliseconds apart, or even as much as a second apart in a very bad day. But what this does is it illustrates how you can have VM1 and a VM1 secondary here that provide that whole fault tolerance existence between the two. As we make changes here to VM1, those changes are eventually going to propagate over to VM1, the secondary. And at any point in time, if I want, I can go here to fault tolerance, and when these aren't grayed out, I can test the failover or migrate to the secondary. So what this does is it effectively presents a way so that I can create a secondary instance of a virtual machine so that if I should experience a problem and the first VM goes down, well, I have the ability to bring that second VM online whenever I need to. All of this, again, is something that you're going to want to implement only whenever you have taken a real good analysis of your business requirements to identify whether or not the things that you have to pay in order to get the fault tolerance are worth the benefits that you get out of receiving fault tolerance. So what we talked about in this nugget, we've really kind of come to an idea of what those requirements are, and I think I've helped you kind of understand what that use case is for enabling fault tolerance should you need to for those particularly mission-critical workloads. We went through the process of configuring fault tolerance and how to enable and disable it on a virtual machine.